Okay, so we're going to be talking about soulmates, and I guess the main question is, does God choose your soulmate, or do you pick your own soulmate? There's quite a dividing line between those who do believe you do choose your soulmate, and there are those who believe that God chooses one for you. And I think it's more a bit of both. God does choose one for you, but it's also up to you to choose who God chooses for you. And that's where the combination comes in. And I'm one of those people who believe that God does predestine who would be best suited for you, who would be best suited to marry you. Because, it doesn't actually make sense for God to determine the will for your life, the path that you should take, to predestine the life that you're walking, but not actually predestine who you're going to be with, because that forms a huge and integral part of your life, because that's the person who you're going to spend the majority of your life with, if you value marriage, that is. So it doesn't make sense for God to leave that key part out, because the person you're with can either pull you down or lift you up. They can either propel you or hold you back. So the person you're with is extremely important to what God wants to fulfill in your life, being fulfilled. It's very important that the will of God is not held back by the person you're married to. And I've seen that happen quite a lot of times, where a guy marries a woman and he wants to go into business, but she doesn't. She doesn't value going to business. She doesn't see the value in starting your own business or anything like that. So she doesn't offer that support because it's not something that she values. So the person you marry is very, very important. It's actually quite crucial, because they can make or break you. And I've seen that happen quite a lot of time, whereby lack of support strains marriages, whereby the one spouse just doesn't understand what the other spouse is doing. As a woman, you might want to go into business, and your husband is just, no, I'm a 9 to 5, I want a job. To understand this business thing. So why are you spending late hours at the office? Why are you still there at 10 working on the business? It's supposed to be here at home. So it's always good to marry someone who will complement you, to marry someone whom you're going to complement, so that whatever it is that God has placed in your heart, the grace that God has given you to walk this life, you walk it with someone who will support that walk, who will support the gifts that God has given you, the talents that God has given you, who will not be a stumbling block, who will not say, what is this thing of yours that you like doing? And that's the thing that God has blessed you with. You're constantly going to be in enmity with that person. That's why they says you should not be unequally yoked. Because, 50 years is a very long time to spend it with someone who you're constantly arguing with over a lack of support, over what you're doing, over your passions, over the gifts that God has given you. It's not a life that is worthwhile. So I'm of the school of thought that God does predestine who would be best suited for you. But at the end of the day, it's also up to you to choose as to whether do you want the person whom God has chosen for you. And it's not necessarily like God is going to say, well, hello, so-and-so, this is the person whom I have chosen for you. No, it doesn't happen like that. Not that I know of in any case. But what I think tends to happen mostly is that the person who you're meant to be with, they'll be in your space. They'll be presented to you in some shape or form. You'll bump into them, you'll meet them. But it's also up to you to hear that still small voice that causes you to lean towards that person, that causes you to find sense in being with them. And sometimes, if you're a woman, your husband won't necessarily be packaged in the shape and form you've always imagined that they'd be packaged in. And it's okay if they're not, It does happen. You get a car and it's not exactly the color you like. Or it's this leather seat's not the shade of brown that you like. But it's one of those things whereby what's important is his character, his values, and the fact that he's a determined someone, he's ambitious, he's able to lead, he's got those characteristics, and the rest doesn't really matter that much because you get used to the way someone looks, and after a while it's, okay. Doesn't mean you don't find them to be handsome, but you get used to the way they look, and what matters most is their leadership capabilities, their leadership abilities, and how they treat you as a person. The type of decisions they make, because that's what makes a life worthwhile. Where you're going to live, how many kids you're going to have, how you're going to raise your children. You can't have differences in how you're going to raise your children because you're going to be constantly arguing about how to raise them instead of raising them. The types of values you'll be able to instill in your children, because it's that mindset that raises children, not looks. So hence why I say looks don't really matter that much. Being attracted to the person is great, and it's not a bad thing to aspire to, but it shouldn't be the determining factor as to whether you're with someone or not. Because 50 years, what matters is not looks. What matters is character. So, yeah, that's my take on, does God choose a person for you? Or does he let you choose? It's actually a bit of both. He presents an option to you. Well, not necessarily an option, the option. And it's up to you whether you choose that person or not. And there's actually a situation whereby God showed us and he said, that person, let's call her Lady X. Lady X was actually supposed to be with Guy Y, but he chose Guy A. She chose Guy A because she thought Guy A was easier to control. He was easier to convince to do what she wanted. But what she actually needed was someone who wouldn't bend to her will, who wouldn't just go with whatever it is that she wanted. She needed someone who could lead her, not someone who she could lead, and she wasn't aware of it. Fast forward, say about 10 years they've been married now, with some kids, and often she gets frustrated because of the type of man she married. She doesn't feel like he's a go-getter, and that's the problem. With marrying a man whom you can control, a man whom you can tell what to do, is that you lead them, and they don't lead you, because you can easily control them or tell them what to do. So now it's frustrating her, and I don't think she's aware that it's that very character trait of being able to control a man that has actually led her to being frustrated. Because, in all honesty, as women, we don't want a man we can control. We want a man who can lead us, a man who can give us direction, a man who exhibits exemplary leadership, who's able to make decisions, who's decisive, who knows what they want, who has a vision, a man who has ambition. That's what we want. Even though some women may enjoy controlling a man, in the end, it ends up frustrating them. And it's just not worth it. It isn't. So yeah. God will present a man to you who will be best suited for you. But the choice still remains yours. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And it's up to you to say yes to life. And sometimes it's not always so obvious what life is and what death is. I guess that's why discernment comes in. And that's why I think every Christian needs to pray for discernment. So you can know that you're making the right decision. Always seek counsel from God, especially when it comes to a spouse. But one thing I did is when I dated my husband, within the first week, I had a conversation with God. I said, God, can we have a conversation? And I was sitting in the taxi when this happened. And I said, I'd like to have an honest conversation with you. This is a guy that I'm dating. I really, really like him. And I can see that I'm going to fall hard for him. So I'd like you to let me know whether do you agree or disagree with me being with him. If you disagree, let me know. Because there's a certain way that God communicates with me. If he doesn't like something that I'm doing, I will know. If I'm doing a sewing project and I'm sewing something incorrectly, I'm about to cut something incorrectly, he will let me know. It's a certain feeling I get. And then sometimes I don't always know how to interpret that feeling. And sometimes I do. And for the times where I'm not able to interpret it and I'm sewing, and then later I realize, oh crap, I didn't sew that properly. And I'm like, oh yes, that's what God was telling me about. It's just that I failed to interpret it the way that he was showing it to me. So there's a specific way he communicates with me, and I know. And during that night where I had the conversation with God in the taxi, he didn't disagree with who I was with. But the previous guy I was dating, oh, he disagreed. Every time that guy called, I got a negative feeling. And it's as if I could feel that God was saying, what are you doing dating this guy? What are you doing? I'm like, Lord, I don't understand why you're disagreeing. Because I'm not sleeping with the guy, we're just dating, I'm not sinning, I'm not doing anything that you don't like. But God kept saying, I don't like the fact that you're with him. And the day came where I actually understood why God was saying, I don't like you being with him. And to cut the long story short, the one thing that came to my mind was, if I stay with this guy, they're going to find me 6 feet under. And it's not going to be pretty. So I need to walk away and leave. And from that day on, I learned how to respect what God was telling me when God communicates with me. If he doesn't like something, I don't try and argue my way out of it or say, no, Lord, but this and this, but this and that. I just go, okay, you don't like it, I'm done with it. Done. Moving on. I'm not going to debate you. I'm not going to try and convince you otherwise. You know better than me. So I've learned to respect God's will. I've learned to respect God's opinion. I've learned to respect what God wants for me. So I don't debate him on it. If he doesn't like it, doesn't like it, move on. So yeah, because God didn't disagree. Fast forward years later, I'm still with my husband, and he's the only man I've been with intimately. And for me, that is an amazing gift that, by the grace of God, I think God has given me, and I've given myself, because I only have memory of one man, and that is amazing for me. It is amazing. Because when I picture intimacy, I only picture my husband. I don't have past relationships or being intimate with other people haunting me or going, oh, oof, I wish you did it like so and so. Oh, I wish it was like so and so with this and this. So I don't have that, you know. I had the blessing and privilege of not bringing previous husbands, which is what they were. If I had done that, that's what they are for other people, into my marriage. And I'm immensely grateful for that. Because there were situations that were closed where God said, stop, no, nope, keep it moving. So I'm grateful that God has been with me throughout. He has walked this path with me, and it's amazing. It's amazing what God will do for your life if you open up yourself to him and you try and walk upright. You try and live in this life. You know, especially the one of remaining a virgin until you get married. There's so much that God has in store for you. So much. But one has to be obedient. One has to lean towards God, you know. Have a relationship with God. And in the morning, greet him. In the evening, say good night. You know, throughout the day, just talk to God about what's in your heart, what's worrying you. Share your dreams with him. Because more often than not, those are dreams that God has placed in you. You wouldn't necessarily say, I've placed this in this dream, but you get many ideas which God has placed in your mind. So go ahead, lean towards him, talk to him. He's there. He's waiting to listen. Because it's a God who loves. It's a God who cherishes. It's a God who wants us to walk upright, to walk in his ways, to sanctify ourselves by the blood of Christ, to remain pure, to have pure hearts, pure intentions, a pure mind, a mind that is obedient to his word, a life that does not seek out sin, and a life that does not take sin lightly. God has amazing things in store for us, if only we would be obedient and walk in his ways and not love what he hates. Oh yes, there's actually one other thing that I forgot to mention with regards to my story of how I met my husband, not how I met my husband, but asking God whether my husband is, asking God whether if he disagrees with me being with my husband. And that was that. Fast forward 7 years later, one of my ancestors actually said to my husband that we brought her to you, which actually was confirmation that he's the one that I was meant to be with. And the other interesting thing is that our paths crossed so many times and we weren't even aware that our paths were crossing. I think over a period of 5 years. Because on the one instance, I wanted to go to a country just because I wanted to break. And funny enough, the same time I wanted to go to that country, he actually took a vacation to that country. And then the other instance, I went to vacation in another city with 2 of my friends. And it so happened that in the very same weekend, he was also vacationing in the same city. And this was a different year. And there's a road that we used to travel on. I used to go on with my sister, which would drop me off at school. And we used to pass his car every day. I think for about a period of a month or 2. At the same, like during the same period of time. So I believe it was around 6:30. 6. So around 6:30, my sister's car would cross his car, like they'd go past each other. And I remember his car because it was one of the first cars to be bought, because there was a new model of cars that was being introduced into the country. So that's how it went. And one time I asked him, and we were busy talking, and he used to say that he used to drive on that road because he was going to work. The certain area was working at. And so I'm like, were you driving that car? And he's like, yes, I was driving that car. I'm like, so it was you we kept on passing. So it was quite interesting that our paths used to cross so much but miss each other, like every time. And until the day came when we actually met. And funny enough, it was not love at first sight, not at all. It was more a bit of disdain at first sight. But not so much disdain, but it was like, oh. Yeah, it was weird, because he thought I was a snob, and I thought he was arrogant. So, given that, one would have never thought they would actually end up married. We'd end up together, and going strong still. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, so that's my little story of us being meant to be, and looking back on how we kept on missing each other, but God was like, those 2 have to be together. So our paths just kept on crossing until the day when our paths crossed, we locked eyes and we met each other, although it wasn't like at first sight. So yeah, that's it from me. Until next time, we shall see what else God teaches me, and I will be sharing. Thank you guys. I hope this helps someone.